Today we're looking at literary analysis, and more specifically, we're looking at setting. Literature doesn't happen in a void, it doesn't happen nowhere, but if it did, it would happen for a reason, because when an author makes choices, they think about where everything's going to be situated. They think about the place, they think about the time, and they think about the atmosphere. One way we can look at this is through the analysis of setting. Setting is the historical or physical space where the events of the text take place. More simply, it's where and when the events of a text is happening. One way that we can look at setting is through the tool of SAT. This is by looking at the space, what is there, what can you see, what physically is in the setting, the atmosphere, this is the feeling or the impression of the setting, and the time. This is when it's happening. It could be a time of a day or it could be a time in history. Let's have a look at an example using Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. Just for some context, The Handmaid's Tale is set in a dystopian future where the environment is being destroyed by nuclear and biological warfare, and a lot of women are left unable to have children. Gilead, the setting of the story, is a society controlled by a fundamentalist regime that treats women as possessions of the state. Here, the remaining fertile women are dressed in red gowns and white hats, and they are made to live with the upper class members of society to provide them with a baby. One of the key settings in this text is the commander's house. As we're reading the text, we can start making notes about the space, atmosphere, and time in order to make sure that we fully understand the setting and we can interpret it properly. So, as we're reading, we might notice that the author says there's a blind plaster eye on the ceiling. There's a light socket that's being plastered over and it gives the impression of a blind eye. Or there's no mirrors, there's very few mirrors in the house, which makes it look like a nunnery. You can see that the door of the room is not locked, and this makes the speaker refuses to acknowledge the room as their own. This makes it feel like they're not welcome. This is setting atmosphere. And also, there isn't much music in the house. Finally, in terms of time, this is in a future society, but a lot of the events in the house take place at night. Now, once we understand these different aspects of a setting, we have to think about how we're going to talk about it. There's three big things that we can think about here. The first one would be mood. What's the mood of the text? Mood specifically refers to the feelings of the reader. So is it making the reader feel scared, or is it making the reader feel at home? Is it making the reader feel relaxed? Is it making the reader feel tense? So how is the setting, through its atmosphere, its space and its time, creating mood in the text? The second is symbolism. Does the setting stand for something, a larger, more abstract idea? One good piece of terminology you can use here is the word microcosm. A microcosm is like a miniature. So it's when you use a setting to represent a larger place. So for example, you might represent an island to symbolize the world at large, or you might use a house to symbolize a greater society. The third thing you can think about, of course, is theme. In what way are the ideas of a text being represented in the setting? Let's have a look at an example where we've put this into a paragraph. Atwood uses the commander's house as a microcosm for Gilead in order to emphasize the theme of oppression. Given that the handmaids are under total control of the novel, a lot of the story takes place in the house or room that Offred is confined to. She describes the house as being like a nunnery, as there are too few mirrors, and there isn't much music. What's more, Offred's bedroom is an unwelcoming environment, which she refuses to refer as my room, and she spends a lot of her time under a plastered over light socket that resembles a blind eye. Thus, the commander's house isn't depicted as homely in any way. Through the use of imagery and associating the space with a nunnery, Atwood establishes a cold, dominating atmosphere and stifling mood as Uffred appears to always be watched. This develops a theme of oppression and reflects the novel's greater setting, Gilead, which is a totalitarian state. Similarly to the Commander's House, the citizens are constantly under surveillance and self-expression has been eliminated. Thus, by repeating the atmosphere of the outside world in the protagonist's house, Atwood emphasises the extent that the characters in the text are controlled. As you can see here, we've used our clear structure, we've got a claim, evidence, analysis, and we've related our ideas at the end to our central claim. But we've used some of those, we've described the setting by looking at the space, what's it look like, we've talked about the atmosphere, and we could have considered the time, but we haven't in this here. What we've done is we've looked at things like microcosm and mood and theme in order to apply this setting to a larger aspect of a text. So, when you're talking about setting, please remember the following things. Setting refers to space, atmosphere, and time, not only place. Space is the physical elements, atmosphere are the emotional elements, and time is the historical elements of the setting. Once you've finished detailing these elements, you can talk about setting by thinking about the mood of a text, what it might symbolise, or the themes. Thank you.